we'll try to tell you who you should be. So your internal compass has to be louder than their expectations.
Our guest today is a woman who describes herself as a unicorn, a Black woman leading at the highest levels of global technology, where she is often the only one in the room. She is the VP of Agile Delivery and Transformation at Salesforce, leading global teams for a $31 billion Fortune 500 company. But beyond the titles, she is a daughter of the Caribbean diaspora, so she's welcome here. A mentor and a fierce advocate for the mental health of those who lead through change. So it is my absolute pleasure, Island Woman family, to welcome Jackie Chambers de Freitas to the podcast.
Is it possible to build a high-impact business without sacrificing your well-being? The Island Woman podcast is the companion to Caribbean founders and leaders who are replacing hustle with authority. Hi, I'm Dianne Squires, aka Dianne, an island woman and founder of Dianne N Squires Consulting. Let's explore how to sharpen your voice, target your visibility, and maximize your economic impact, all through the lens of a big and simple life. Welcome to the Island Woman podcast.
Jackie, welcome again, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a privilege and an honor. I'm glad to be here.
You know, we usually kick off with some version of this next question. And so this version for you is, if you had to create a survival kit for a Caribbean island woman, navigating the global C-suite as you do, and you could only pack 3 items, what would they be, and in what order of priority?
Oh, okay. So the first thing I would pack is a recording of my mother telling me, "You can do anything you want, Jackie." So that would always help me persevere through, hearing her voice telling me I can be anything and everything I want to be.
Yeah.
I would take music. I'm a huge music lover of all genres. And this morning when I was working out, I was actually listening to a soca playlist. My husband is from Trinidad and Tobago. So I was listening to an amazing soca playlist. And then third thing, I would take something that I could write with. That would mostly be the one time I would have time to myself to kind of jot down and write my memoir. I would do something like that. So that's what I would do.
That's so nice. But listen, we know that your husband is Trini or Trini background, but tell our audience, like, what is your connection to the Caribbean? Where are you from? What's your flag? What's your heritage? Let us know.
Yeah, so I am Jamaican raised, but British born. So I was born in Oxford in the UK. That's my hometown. But my father is from St. James, from Montego Bay, and my mother is from Kingston. So my oldest brother and sister were born in Jamaica, and myself and my next brother up were born in Oxford in the UK. So I have that, that Caribbean, Jamaican, and British heritage kind of mixed together.
Wow, nice. I love it. You know, when your team reached out, and I was so happy that they did, and I took a look at some of the work that you're doing, I thought to myself, Jackie does not need to be on this podcast. Jackie could be keeping her head down at Salesforce, transforming her teams, transforming all those ladies in Atlanta who are also Agile specialists. And you wouldn't need to be doing anything else. By your resume and your bio, you've made it. So my big question is, why is it important for you to not be silent, to appear on platforms like this, to be visible, to not be quiet, to do the usual thing that we do as women, Caribbean women, Black women, keep your head down and do the work?
Yeah, because I always like to say this. When I was coming up in the tech world, right, 99.999% of the time, especially as I went into executive leadership, I was the only woman in the room, often one of the only Black people in the room. And if there were other Black people in the room, I was mostly one of the only Caribbean people in the room of Caribbean heritage.
Yeah.
So, I do this so that I can help people understand that you too can get here. I'm a true believer that you can't become what you don't see. And, I want to let people know that, uh, there's especially for something like this, which is talking about Caribbean heritage, is that, you have to know exactly who you are. I think sometimes, especially moving to the US, you feel you have to, like sanitize who you are, because the corporate world will try to tell you who you should be. So your internal compass has to be louder than their expectations, right?
Yeah.
And, I want people to understand that, as a Black woman and as a Black woman with Caribbean heritage, they sometimes mistake your passion for aggression, right? You need the ability to filter out the bias and the vibe shift so you can stay focused on your actual mission. And, you talked about my role, which is mainly about transformation and, agility. And now I've moved into more AI delivery too in the past couple of months. It's about the power of the pivot. So that's the reason why I don't keep my head down. I want to, lean back and lend a hand to other women, specifically other Black women, and especially other Caribbean women, right? And just overall immigrant women who have to navigate corporate America. So that's why I don't keep my head down.
I love it. I love it. On the Island Woman podcast, we talk a lot about that balance of having your huge ambition and balancing that with well-being, which we will get into a little bit more. But that idea of a big and simple life and not just staying quiet, especially as women. There's a statistic that I kept quoting during season 2 of the podcast, which talked about how Caribbean and women in the Latin America, just by elevating their incomes, helped societies in the Caribbean and Latin America come out of poverty. That was women participating on a different level, right? And yes, it may have cost them something, but yes, it has been a reward to our societies. And clearly that's something that we want to see more women contributing at optimal levels, but also staying well enough to do so.
Absolutely. And I'm very transparent, right? Mental health issues run in my family. And a lot of that, I think, is because just as, Caribbean women, we bear a lot. Mm-hmm. And we are also always working hard, always trying to be strong. And we don't always take care of our mental health. And, the dirty little secret of leadership, and oftentimes, being the representation of your family, always striving and working, and especially in what I do, where I walk into the room and I'm kind of a champion for change, right? Pushing for transformation, pointing out those gaps, persevering, trying to be your best in that system is exhausting. Yeah. And so, you talked about staying visible and vocal. I also do it because I know there's someone out there looking for a signal that they belong in these seats. Yeah. I've always talked about that. But, and if I stay quiet, the gap stays wide. But I have to be honest about the cost, right? It really can affect your mental health. So I prioritize my mental health by being very protective of my offline time. I make sure I'm not just a resource to others, but a whole person for myself. I remember when I started at Salesforce about 4 years ago, my boss mentioned to somebody, "Oh, Jackie really protects her time." Yes, I do, yes. Right? Yes, she does. When I'm available, when I'm leaned into work, when I'm on, you get 120% of me. But when it's my personal time and when I'm done, I'm done. You know what I mean? And I set that boundary early so that there is not this expectation that I'm available at all hours of the night. And don't get me wrong, I have a great boss. She does respect that. But I think she was a little taken aback in the beginning. I was a new employee and I kind of stuck to that. So yeah.
But yeah, now she understands. You
Yes,
know,
absolutely.
I'm glad that you touched on your work because, of course, a lot of people hear about Agile and Scrum Masters and all these things. Not everybody is familiar with what that actually means. So maybe give us a little bit of insight into what it is that you do. Please make it layman friendly, especially for
Absolutely.
me. And
So,
tell us what Agile is all about.
so Agile itself is a philosophy and a mindset, right? I'll give you a quick story. Back in 2001, like 17 like-minded software engineers went on a ski trip in Utah and were very frustrated at how software was being developed and how it was very slow. It didn't involve the customer. And they came up with this manifesto for Agile. And really, it was like a mindset and a philosophy. It's a set of principles and values on how people should deliver software. And it took off and kind of overtook the software engineering community. And really, basically, before that kind of mindset and philosophy, it used to take months and months and months, sometimes years, for product or software to get out of the door. And what Agile introduced is this idea of being able to get small increments out to a customer for them to see it, for you to understand if it's what they want or not, and to get value sooner. So that's where Agile kind of started back in 2001. And I can't believe I'm saying this now that, Agile had its 25th year anniversary this year. A lot of people think it's still such this new thing. And if you think about how fast the tech world moves, 25 years is pretty ancient. And so what we're finding now with the onset of AI and agentic experiences, we still have that foundation of Agile, but now we're looking more at how AI delivery and transformation will fundamentally shift the way we work. So even myself and my organization has gone through kind of an AI transformation, and we've moved from being solely vested in Agile to being more AI delivery and transformation. So even within myself in the past year and a half, I've had to go through my own transformation and transform my org. So yeah, that's what Agile is. It's still a foundation of what we do, but with now AI on top of that, it's even more iterative. It's even more, transformational, and we're getting more value out to the people who buy our products, much more faster.
Okay, so you're integrating AI and then getting out projects and products on that kind of incremental, let's test it and see what they like. And then when you get those test results back or you see how they like it, then you're making changes again. So it's this
Exactly.
step change.
Right. You're constantly taking like your stakeholder or customer feedback in small iterations. Because what used to happen was, we'd give this huge estimate and we'd say, oh, we'll get it to you in 6 months or a year and a half. And then at that 6 month or year and a half point, the world has changed. The customer might need something different, but yet you've invested all this work. When really, if you brought people along the way, you could pivot, you could make changes, you could negotiate, and really think about it. If you get your product out to market sooner, it's making money sooner.
Yeah.
So that's what's really kind of created that change within the software engineering community in the past like 20, 25 years. So it's totally changed. Now, the funny thing is there are still organizations who still work in the old way, but I would say the majority of the software engineering community really does work in that more agile, iterative way.
That really made me think of how sometimes we think of just ourselves and our lives. And, if only I do this big step here, now I meet this particular big goal, then everything is going to be fine. And if we don't achieve that specific goal, then we feel like a total disappointment and even failure. So
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, if you apply Agile to your life and what does that look like and how could we do?
Oh, absolutely. I call it ruthlessly prioritizing and pivoting when needed. And I like progress over perfection. I think a lot of us lean into perfection. Like the whole thing has to be done, it has to be big to have impact. And Agile really changed my life because it helped me understand that iterating or testing things out or getting enough done to get you to the next step really can change your life. Because like you said, right, if we don't finish that big project or it's not perfect, we feel defeatist. And a lot of times we don't look at it as a learning lesson because we've invested so much. When you break things down to smaller, or this is good enough, or let me do this part and see what the results are, it's instant gratification, one, right? When you do get good results. And then also it's a quick learning if you fail. And I always say you're failing forward to learn, and it's better to fail forward by doing something small or doing it in a short period of time than investing all that time and failing and feeling like you've wasted everything you've invested. So yeah, it definitely changed my life, and that's definitely how and the kind of philosophy I have around the way I work through day to day.
Yeah, I think it works perfectly with the concept of a big and simple life, just iterating day by day and rewarding yourself even for those small wins. I think that is so important. I do want to talk more because there will be a lot of women in our community. There are women like me who are, in marketing or communications, or I was in dance and culture before, who tend to lean to what society tends to think of as the softer skills for work. But you were one of those women who started off as a software engineer. And here you are in Agile at one of the largest tech companies in the world. What's your encouragement to women who feel that sense of, I like math, I like technical things, I like to make things work. I'm not going over on those soft skills side. What's your encouragement to them? Because I think some of them may be out there, maybe thinking, does the world really value me as a woman with harder, let's call them harder skills? I know that's not the right word, but
right.
Yeah.
And so I always say this too, right? As much as I am a software engineer, that's my background, and I'm an executive now, I still have my soft side, right? You can have both. But to be honest, when people meet me, they're very shocked that I work in tech, right? But I try to embrace the duplicity of both, right? I always say I was raised by a very strict, straightforward kind of. My mom, growing up, had quite a lot of hard edges. She has softened a lot in her old age. But she was also a soft woman. She was a woman who liked fashion. As much as she encouraged us to be educated and to be in our book, right? I think both Caribbean did hear that. She also encouraged us to like fashion and to like, makeup and those kinds of things. So I say there are two sides to it. When I lead in my company, people always say I lead with a sense of humility and joy. And that's good for me, right? Because oftentimes I'm in spaces where people, we're engineers, right? They're very buttoned up. They're very straightforward, don't have a lot of room for looking in other directions. I bring a sense of joy in that. But then, the analytical side, that side where you can lean into things, where you're a little bit more analytical, is important too, especially for me where I work in predominantly male spaces, and men tend to think that way. But I will say today, in this age of AI and how AI has made technical things accessible to everyone, whether you're in marketing or dance or, entertainment, I think now this time of AI is like a level playing field, because it's kind of taken that specialization out of it and it's democratized everything. So this is an amazing time for all women, whether, you consider yourself in a field that's more soft skills, if you're a person who comes from a more analytical side, you can use that. But, I think the future of the world is a little bit different, and you can embrace both. So that's my thought.
I love that. And, I started out, like my undergraduate degree was economics and accounting, and somehow, followed that trajectory into dance and then into marketing. So I think for women especially, it's really critical to be able to use both your creative and your analytical sides. And that actually is a great boon to organizations. And speaking of boon, you talked about being in a lot of male dominated spaces and being this unicorn, but you call it both a boon and a burden. So I wanted you to explain that. What's the great?
Yes. So I usually it is a double-edged sword, right? On the one hand, there's the power in being the only in the room. One, because everybody wants to hear what you say. Like, think about it. You're a unicorn. Like, they want to know what you're doing there, how you got there, why your hair's blue, why you fart like sprinkly rainbows or whatever, right? And it's good because people pay attention, and also you tend to see the gaps others miss, right? You're the bridge between like that traditional corporate structures and the actual diverse world that we live in. But there's also the weight of it, right? Everybody wants to know why you're there, why you have blue hair, how come you can blow rainbow bubbles, whatever. When you represent, especially the diaspora, right, in these high level spaces, you feel like you have to be excellent, plus 10% every single day. You aren't just representing yourself, you're like building a blueprint for everyone coming after you. And it's a responsibility I take seriously, but I've had to learn how to carry the weight without letting it crush my spirit, because it makes you very visible. So it's a balance, and it didn't come right away. It was something I had to learn over the years. But, there's a positive and kind of a negative side that you have to manage.
Do you think, though, that your Caribbean heritage, you talked about your mom, both having that side of getting your book, which is a Caribbean thing. Trust me
Very
when I
much.
tell you I'm from Barbados. We have this in common with everybody else because we knew the value of education for, elevating yourself out of poverty, one, or just elevating yourself to a different status, which was very important for Black
Yes.
people in colonial, colonized countries, right?
Yes.
But do you think your cultural heritage and your values, do you think that helps you to stay in the room and feel grounded and be visible and manage that boon and burden?
Absolutely, right? One thing you will know about those of us from the Caribbean diaspora, we are very rooted in our heritage, we are very rooted in our culture, and we're very proud of what we stand for and where we come from. And so going into any room, right, no matter what may come your way, no matter what is going on, you always have that rooted in yourself of who you are, what you stand for, and what you're about. And so I know that in itself, being raised, I always say, yeah, I was born and raised in Oxford, in England. I walked out the door, I was a regular, British kid. I walked in the door. It was full Caribbean heritage, right? We had a large Caribbean community, and it really did lift me up and give me that solid foundation. So yes, I would say my Caribbean roots, right? My proudness, my heritage really just help me when I'm in those spaces. Absolutely.
Yeah. And Caribbean people like your mom, like she's very that strict nature, but also no matter what your social standing or status, there is this kind of bigness about what you want and what you want to achieve. And so we here at the Island Woman podcast, we've developed this kind of ambition and well-being scale. So we want to maintain that big ambition. We want to remain well to do so, so they both keep feeding each other. And so I want to ask you now to put you on this scale. Let's figure out where you on the scale. So on a scale of 0 to 10, 0, not important at all, and 10 being your life mission, how committed are you to expanding your economic leadership impact in the area that you are in now and even beyond?
I would honestly say it's a 9 out of 10. The reason why I don't say 10 is because I think everything shouldn't be about, right? only expanding your reach and only ambition and only getting there, right? There's more to life than that. But I would definitely say a 9 out of 10, because I think it's very, very important, right? That you expand and you grow. And yeah, so that's what I would say. It's a 9 out of 10.
Okay, and then on the well-being side, 0, you're totally out of it. And 10, for want of a better word or phrase, perfectly balanced when it comes to your freedom outside of work, your time to spend with loved ones, family, friends, time for hobbies or the things that you really love. Where are you on that scale?
I would say a 10 out of 10, right? Some days I'm an 8 out of 10, to be honest, because I realize I can't be great in my ambitious world if I'm not great in my personal world, right? That is very, very important to me, right? I always say there are ebbs and flows, right?
Yeah.
But I make time for the people I love and the travel that feeds my soul, and I try to bring joy into pretty much everything I do. And again, yeah, I realize my mission, my ambition, where I'm trying to be is only as good as my peace of mind. And it took me a while to learn that. I would say about 10, 15 years ago, I was failing, right? The ambition side was most probably, 15 out of 10. And the other side was maybe a 2 out of 10. And it wasn't making me a very good husband, a very good wife, a very good daughter, a very good friend. And I remember I went to see a therapist, in fact, a Jamaican woman, and she asked me, well, what do you like to do for fun? And I couldn't list anything.
Fun?
What? What's fun?
What's fun?
Right. And she made me write down all the things I love to do, whether it was something minuscule to something grandiose. And I did a lot of work around bringing joy into my life. And so I think that's why I'm where I am now. And I realized that when I took that stand, the ambition comes because I'm happy within and I'm a fully whole person versus only concentrating on, the expanding my reach and the ambition and things like that. It took me a while to learn because as a culture, right, oftentimes I think we're taught to sacrifice to get to that ambition, and then you can have the well-being later. And I've learned that the two go hand in hand. You can't have one or the other.
I mean, I think that's true, but do you think it's also an age thing? As you grow and you mature and you've had the experiences to go, yeah, the last time I did this, yeah, we made some progress, but then we ended up sliding a bit more,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wisdom comes with age, right? And, experience forces you to self-reflect and, to create better situations in the future. Absolutely. I do agree with that. Age does make a difference.
Now that we're talking about age, I did an episode on work, aging, and realities for Caribbean women. And there are realities. You talked about AI and the fact that now you are learning or relearning in your own job, something that, since 2001, that took off and so many people adopted. But now AI is one of those things that's taking off and people are a little bit afraid. People who have been in their professions for quite a long time and are at different levels, high levels even, are afraid. But specifically for women, is there anything that you would want to say to a woman, especially a Caribbean woman who may be over 50, over 45, over 50, and thinking, where do I go now with a career?
Yes.
Is it possible for me to pivot, for me to iterate and get better? Who feels hopeless?
Yeah, definitely. The first thing I say, and people are always surprised by this because I do work in technology and I work in AI. I think women over 45, over 50 need to really lean into developing their brand. Now, I know that sounds crazy because we think of millennial generation and Gen Z being all over social media and those things. But really, the future is going to be a very different economy. And a lot of it is going to be down to how you brand yourself and how you lean into marketing yourself, which is very strange sometimes for women and Caribbean women, especially corporate women. So that's one, right? Number two is don't be afraid of AI. Try it. Right now, AI is at a point where we're all at the same level. It's democratized, and it's democratized everywhere. You can get free, versions of Gemini and Claude and others, and just play with it and use it in your everyday life. And really, it's those types of things that are going to make you stand out in this future kind of way of working. Because I think Oprah Winfrey had done an interview recently with one of the most prominent, it was the Black woman, most prominent AI researchers. And she was talking about the world will change in the future and it will become more of like an individual gig economy. The traditional ways we've kind of gone up the corporate ladder or developed our careers will go away. And it's those who kind of own who they are, own their brand, lean into how these tools can either help them develop their own enterprises or can, represent something different for an organization are the ones who will survive. Yeah.
Yeah. So just be open to learning as you age. We're no longer in that time period. You climb the corporate ladder, 5 years to retirement. Let's just coast here. And then we go home and we just take care of the grandkids and we garden.
Yeah, those days are over. And, women of all ages are reinventing themselves out of necessity, especially here in the US, because 300,000 Black women lost their jobs. And two, things like social media, things like AI open you up to other avenues and other ways to, create a career for yourself. Anyone can pivot. I think just women in our age group, I'm a Gen Xer, need to be open, right, to trying and learning new things. And another thing we have a hard time with is learning from people younger than us. That can be hard. That can be hard when you've invested 30, 40 years in your career to hear some, person 20, 30 years older than you tell you you're doing it wrong and you should do it this way.
And you should do it this way. Yeah, for sure. I agree with that so much. So Jackie, it's been really wonderful talking to you, but I just wondered, I know that you have messages that you want to put out there everywhere that you go. And if there's anything that we haven't touched on, but you want the women who listen to this podcast where we're talking about our ambition, our well-being, intentional living, and being wealthy and being well, what would your message to them be?
I will double down as coming from a family that has mental health, that is something that runs through it. What I see a lot with Caribbean women sometimes is that we don't take that as seriously. I really do believe that in order to do well, to become wealthy, to be the best person that you can be, you really need to think about your well-being. And it's not just health, right? It's not just wealth, it's also your mind. So take the time. We do a lot for others. We sacrifice a lot of ourselves for family, for children, for our partners. I encourage Caribbean women to really take care of their mental health. There is nothing wrong with going to a therapist. There is nothing wrong with maybe finding that Instagram account that gives you that, mental health check every day.
Yeah.
That's the only way.
Calling the hotline. We have a hotline here in Barbados. Call the hotline.
Exactly. Call the hotline because you need to be not only physically well, but you need to be mentally well to strive in whatever it is you want to do. And I've seen too many, Caribbean women, even women in my family, not take that seriously and do all this work and can't, enjoy the fruits of their labor because they're dealing with mental health issues.
And that is the worst thing. So we want to be able to create that wealth and have the well-being so we can enjoy it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. you. Yeah.
It's been such a pleasure talking to you, Jackie. Thank you so, so much for your time. Thank you for sharing a bit of your expertise and some of your learnings with us. It's been wonderful to have you on the podcast. And I hope to have you again.
Yes, I'd love to come back, and I appreciate this so much, Dianne. It was wonderful having this conversation, and thank you for having me. This was amazing.
You're absolutely welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to support and to tune in to the Island Woman podcast. Until next time, peace.